All right, we're live. How you doing?
Well,
Oh,
sorry, I've become a wait. What's going on?
you cut out. I didn't hear you for a second.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, yeah, doing well. I've become like a pretty uh unhealthy night owl. So I actually
Hmm.
just woke up.
Oh,
So um,
gotcha.
yeah.
Um. Well, hopefully you're awake enough to talk about the light-hearted topic of racism and other isms and phobias.
Hell yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, off the top of your head, or at least what you feel describes it best for how you like to use it, if you use it at all, what would you just say is the definition of racism?
Uh, Off the top of my head, I would just be like discriminating or like causing harm to somebody on the basis of their race rather than like um something else. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Lewis here in the comments says racism equals the belief that one or more races is morally inferior to one or more other races. Morally inferior. What are your thoughts on that? He put morally inferior in there.
I mean, on the belief that one or more races is morally inferior to one or more other races. Um, Depends on what he means by that. Like if certain races are more likely to go vegan or something, I might like value them more. But
Hmm.
that's not because of their race. It's just because of that's just because of like um other factors surrounding it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting. I want to look into the history of different dictionaries because I'm obsessed with language and figuring out the best ways to use language and communicate with others. And Google is huge. Almost everybody uses Google. And when you Google the definition of a word, Google uses Oxford Dictionary. And then the other most common one is Merriam-Webster. And I want to do like a deep dive to figure out why I should care about one more than the other. But so right now I'm at racism in Oxford Dictionary because of Google, and it says prejudice, discrimination, and antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. I guess that typically part doesn't matter. It's always interesting when a definition adds a little note of typically or usually, because if it's the definition, I guess it doesn't matter um, how common it happens in a different way. So okay, so here's I I usually don't like the ism words and the phobia words because I figure it seems like a blanket way to call something out without talking about your actual concerns with it. And I find that in most cases, if you break apart what somebody's talking about, most things that are called racism, sexism, whatever, uh, I don't think I would describe them as those things. So let's do a little experiment. Can you give me an example of something you would call racist? I don't know if an action can be racist, but I also don't know if words can be racist. But can you give me an example of maybe words that, with the feelings behind them, I guess, of what somebody could say to somebody else that you would call racist?
Like like someone like a situation of someone like saying something that would be racist.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's break down before we do that. Is there anything? So aside from words and feelings, is there anything that could technically be racist? Like, if one guy goes around the country, let's say in the US, and in every state he kills a different Asian man. Let's say it's a white guy that's doing it. Would it even be fair to call something racist if there are no words or known feelings involved?
There are no wait, if there are no words or feelings involved?
Like if me and you are unaware of any words that took place or the knowledge, like maybe the like what's the word? I don't know why it's escaping me right now, but when somebody admits they did a thing, confession. If there's no confession of, I went around killing Asian people because I think they are inferior to us. If we have no words, if we have no knowledge of the internal thoughts of a person, and then we also have no words, can actions be racist?
I I mean, I think so. I mean, like if I had like if someone owned a bunch of slaves but didn't like say why they owned them, I think I would feel like that would be racist. Um,
Okay.
right?
Interesting. Okay. So if I had 10 black slaves and my neighbor had 9 black slaves but 1 white slave or something, do you think it would be fair to say that I'm racist where they are just not caring about humans?
Uh, hmm. I think you could maybe hmm. I would say I think me personally, I would think I would probably see you both as um like leaning towards racist, but then the your friend with the one white slave, I may like lean more towards like start leaning more towards like, oh well, maybe they just like don't value humans in general rather than
Hmm.
like maybe they just like slavery rather than like are like particularly racist. But I
But what
would
if
but
you
with with like the high amount of like black slaves they had, I would like okay, well maybe that's racist.
I would say it's reasonable to assume, but I don't know if it's fair to do anything past assuming. Like sort of like something with like George Floyd and Derek Chauvin was his name. We can assume he's racist if we want because the person he kneeled on the neck of was black. And then if we hear other information, like the week before that he did something negative to a black guy, or we have this situation where there was a white criminal that he didn't do this thing to, then we can go, I'm going to assume it. I'm going to assume he's racist. But can we declare he's racist? Can we know it?
Um, okay, so there's this there's this thing I go back and forth with like what um when we call something racist, like what should we be focusing on like so like if like hurricanes affected like black people more than they affected white people, or are hurricanes racist? Um and
Mhm.
I don't know, like I may kind of sort of lean towards
Hmm.
that, like I may sort of lean towards like hurricanes could be racist. um but then I'm like, is there utility in like using like racist like the word racism as like something that involves intention? um
Hmm.
because I think
W-
that's how most people use it, right? I think most people when they say racism, they're talking about something that like, oh, like I caused harm to this race, um because there's like some intention involved. But
Hmm.
but then
Yeah,
like it's like, yeah.
I think there'd have to be intention. Well, especially if we're going with Oxford, it says prejudice, discrimination, etc., by an individual, and then blah 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 against an individual or group. So in this case, if we're assuming an individual would not be an individual tsunami or an individual hurricane or whatever. And even species wise, I would guess individuals referring to human. If a dog happens to only bite black people, I don't think it's fair to call the dog racist because we don't have any reason to assume that that dog sees white humans or Asian humans and goes, I like those people, but I'm going to discriminate against these black people. And now that would be interesting if there's some psychology that could happen there where if a dog was beat by, let's switch it around so it doesn't seem like I'm playing favoritisms to races. If a dog was beaten every time it was around a white person, the white person beat it, but every time it was around a black person, they like just loved it and pet it and whatnot. Would the dog eventually notice race and like go up to all the black people and stay really far and cower from white people based on the color? That'd be interesting to find out.
I mean, I'm not sure. I just kind of I'm sort of looking at it in like the same way as like morals, right? Like like if someone has like really good intent, like if someone like thinks that like someone has really good intentions, but then like the consequences are really bad, that person's a bad person. So like if someone has like yeah, certain like intentions, but then like the consequences are like causing like large amounts of suffering towards a certain race, that might be racist.
Ooh, I just gotta counter that real quick. If
Yeah.
I mail money to a place that I'm being told some starving children with flies on their face are going to be fed because I'm donating the money, I donate every day, and it turns out that money's going to some horrible person that's using the money to do a horrible action, and there's a horrible outcome of consequences. I don't think that would make me a bad person. That would make me being a deceived person that is a good person, that my actions led to bad outcomes. I think, or at least that's how I would word it.
Yeah. Well, so there's a okay. So yeah, there are like situations like that, but that would then fall onto like yeah the other person. I would think of more situations like I think it might be a little bit different if like maybe you were like religious and like you thought that God told you to um like stop all of like vaccinations or something. Um,
Oh, because you're literally doing a bad action where you think it's good. It's not that you're doing a good action that the outcome is bad. I see. That makes sense. Okay. Um, yeah, no, I would say that's right. Maybe I still think intentions has such a huge element of what makes someone good or not. If you're, but no, I mean, your
so
intentions could be that you think it would be good to destroy all the Jewish people, and so your intentions are good, but you're still doing a bad action. So that's still intentions aren't everything. Yeah, I'd say you're making a good point there for sure.
there's a fun little like thought experiment that I heard where you're like you're hiking with your friend and then your friend trips and like falls off this cliff and your friend just like before he like fully falls down he like grabs onto the ledge or onto the edge and you like oh I want to save my friend so you like run up and like as you're running up you kick this rock and the rock like hits them in the face and they fall off the cliff. um it's like um was that person like a bad person? But then
Mm.
the other like part is like so imagine the same scenario happens but then there's a bow hunter below and the bow hunter just really likes like shooting people on cliffs so he sees your friend hanging on the cliff and he pulls his bow back and shoots him but he misses and the arrow like gives the guy like the something to grab onto so he can pull himself up um, back up off the cliff. So it's like who was the in the right there? Like was it
Yeah.
you who tried to save your friend but like then like kicked him off the cliff, or was it the bow hunter who who shot the arrow. And
Yeah. I mean, in the sense that I think we can, it's complicated, but in my mind, I think there are certain actions that are moral or immoral. So if your intentions are to do an action, let's say that I could declare is moral, then then yeah, it wouldn't matter if there's a bad outcome or not. The intentions are what matter. But then again, we all have a different take on what's moral or not. Like Hitler thought the moral thing to do for all humanity would be to take out the Jews, and so even if he had good intentions, that doesn't make him good. But yeah, no, it's an interesting thought experiment. It means that the best thing to play out as far as suffering and pleasure goes is it would be better for this guy to try to kill this person shooting the arrow than for you to try to save your friend if you knew these outcomes for sure. Yeah, it's complicated.
yeah.
I'll throw out really quick that a friend of mine of sorts on online named MZR and Faith said that he subbed your channel recently and he finds your content very interesting. And then Lewis from our group says racist hurricanes with a bunch of laughing faces. And he's calling you uber foolish.
Nice. Based.
But yeah, okay, let's see. Okay, so in my mind, I would say, well, let's at least, for sake of conversation and for sake of definition, let's say that we're talking about individuals, humans being racist. Do, aside from assumptions, do you think it's fair to call something like for example, do you feel comfortable calling Derek Chauvin racist for what he did to George Floyd, or do you only feel comfortable saying he might have been racist or he probably was racist?
Well, so when we so when we look at I'm bringing the whole Bowman thing back up into this for a little bit,
Okay.
because I think it sort of applies. So the whole point of the whole like the Bowman experience is that like, okay, yeah, we should probably value saving the friend over shooting the friend, in like the real world big picture.
Mm-hmm.
But why should we do that? It's because good intentions tend to bring about good consequences. So it's like even if there is like, handfuls of times where like the good intention brings about the bad consequences, we value it because of the consequences. If that makes sense.
Yeah, like
The foreseeable. Yeah.
if you convince a group of people to try to save people all the time, you and not convince a bunch of people to try to shoot bow and arrows at people to kill them all the time, then you're probably going to have a better outcome than if you don't convince a bunch of people to save people all the time, but you do convince all the people you can. Like, it's so fun to shoot people with arrows, you should try it out. If you convince them to do that, even if one misses and makes something to grab onto, the likelihood of the outcomes, at least from what we can, what I've observed in life, not that I've tried either of these two things, would be that you'd have more dead people unless everybody was bad shots, and then you'd probably still have dead people because they'd be so bad of a shot that not only would they not hit the person, but they wouldn't lodge it above them to have something to grab onto. They'd just fall off the cliff. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So
But how do you link it to knowledge or assumptions of racism?
so with this like police officer, um, it would just come down to like are his actions routinely like causing like harm to black people? And I don't know him well enough to like I all I know is just like the video, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I actually wouldn't claim that he's racist. I think I would just like he could be, maybe he is. He could just like kneeling on people's necks for fun or something. Or yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, I would say I wouldn't know if he's racist or not. I don't think there's enough. I
Okay.
don't know enough. There might be enough to conclude that, but there's not enough for me. I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think we should be careful with our words. Another example I'd bring up that would be the opposite end of where you can almost definitively declare racism, unless I get talked out of it or talk myself out of it, would be like a restaurant that has a sign that says "No blacks allowed," like happened in the South in the '60s and prior. Um, because that it's somebody like admitting it. And so I think we need to be careful with our words because racism I think racism is bad personally. I'm not against the idea of somebody of human it's complicated anyways. I'll just say racism is bad. Um, and so to throw something around like candy, to just take a phrase and just like, I'm going to throw it here, I'm going to throw it there. I'm going to slightly assume this thing, but instead of announcing I'm assuming it, I'm going to call it this thing. And it really bothers me when somebody takes something really important, like this idea of racism. I think most humans would love if they could press a button or have enough conversations that would end racism. And so when I almost want to call it lie about something like racism, it takes it a lot longer to end it, I would say. If we assume somebody's racist, but we declare out loud that they're racist, we could be right, but we are lying, I think. I guess that's my next question to you. If we don't know something, but we declare it as almost fact and not as an assumption, would you call that lying?
Um, yeah, something like that. I think yeah.
Okay. Like, so for somebody to say, if Derek Chauvin never announced that he was racist, and for somebody to say what that cop did was racist, and that person knows that they don't truly know that, yeah, I think it's fair to call that lying, even if they were right. You could accidentally be right about a lie. So yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Well, it does water down the importance of the word. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna say you have to be an individual to be racist, and I think we're leaning towards that. It has to be intentional. It's interesting that unintentionally the outcomes could lead to a race being affected, but to be racist or for there to be racism, um, are we going with intentional?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that.
Okay, if you got drunk, had a nice 4 or 5 hour stream, and then afterwards got in your car and just drove drunk, eyes closed, driving like crazy, and everybody of every race is just out partying and they're for some reason playing in the street and running around. There's all these different races, but you don't even see them. Your eyes are closed and you're drunk. Somehow you haven't crashed yet, but every person you hit happens to be, I don't know, Native American. We haven't gone there yet. Is anything racist here that's happened?
I'm not sure because I'm going back and forth on how I want to use the definition of racism. Right? Is it
Yeah.
just like it particularly affects like so like I don't know. I think I well no maybe I should use the intentional one because I think most people will use intention. Um,
hmm
yeah,
Yeah, well, and
but
maybe for that word, that's what's needed, and for a different word, like you could say there is an unfair racial outcome because of this, but it wouldn't be that there is an unfair racial outcome because of racism. It would just be an or a statistically disproportional outcome for race or whatever. Yeah, like I think it's best in my mind, whatever the definition of racism is, that it involves intention. Otherwise, does it matter if somebody's racist? If I'm going to accidentally harm any other race than my own, East Asian people, all people from India, hey, babe, if I'm going to accidentally harm 10 people from East Asia, but no other races for the most part or whatever, and then the end of my life, the outcome is that they're harmed. Is there a benefit in saying that I was racist because the outcome of my actions accidentally involved one race?
Um, where so for like sort of one-off things, I don't think so. But like what I'm sort of questioning is like the long-term. Um, so something like supporting like affirmative action or something, where it's like
Oh.
where it's like um no, I don't have strong opinions on affirmative action, but like suppose like affirmative action like really like harmed like particular races, um and like supporting it, for years and years is like just like harming these races. Like even if your intentions are good, may seem racist.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That that's interesting. Because, like for example, I'm guessing you're familiar with the Supreme Court decision based on the Harvard situation, where because of affirmative action and they wanted more black students, it made it so you'd have to have a higher test scores if you were Asian. So a lot of Asians were being discriminated against in a sense. Not that all discrimination is bad, but in this case, it's likely bad. So doing this intentionally good act, intentionally good. I might be wording that bad. Doing an act with the intentions that are good, anyways, of helping out black people, and then it negatively affecting Asian people. It almost doesn't matter what the intentions were if the outcome is harming a race because of your choices that were. I guess if you don't know the outcome, it's like the driving. I think there is wiggle room. I think it's worth not shutting out. But yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's set that aside anyways. Because yeah, that's pretty tricky. Um, okay. So I feel like actions mostly are. It's almost impossible to describe an action as racist. Now words. What would be a set of words that you would call racist? I don't mean words that are inappropriate to say, but just you use black, Asian, whatever. But then like the things you're saying about that person or whatever. Or let's use white.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Or let's make
Can
up one. Let's say all of a sudden there's green people, and they show up. They show up to Utah. What's something that some of your neighbors to Utah that you'd be like, oh man, that's racist. Don't do it.
um, wait, so what would be racist? Okay, so
Yeah.
someone comes to Utah and tells me something racist.
Yeah, some green people start showing up to Utah, and then some people start talking about them in what's something they could say about these green people that you would describe as racist.
Oh, so someone's racist to the green people. I hate green people because they're green. I guess.
I hate green people because they're green. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I hate green people because they're green. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so now that we got past the awkwardness and made up something about green, let's just say a white person saying it about a black person. I hate black people because they're black. Now let's separate that a little bit. What if they just said, "I don't like the look of black people"? Now is this a would you consider that racist to not like the look? And we're not necessarily talking about like attraction like romantically or anything, just like as far as aesthetically, something they like to look at. Like, I like the look of a maple tree, but I don't like the look of an oak tree. Really like looking at Asian people and white people, but I don't like looking at black people. Is this just like a personal preference of what you happen to enjoy and you're just being honest, or is that racism?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, people have like particular like preferences when it comes to dating. People like
Hmm.
taller and shorter people. People do tend to like different like skin colors more than other skin colors and stuff.
Hmm.
And I don't see anything hugely wrong with that. But is it racist? Um, that's
Let's
another question.
Yeah, let's remind
Um,
ourselves of the words. So it's prejudice, discrimination, and antagonism. So I wouldn't call that antagonism unless you're going up to people unsolicited, telling them, just so you know, your race is the one I'm not attracted to. So that could be antagonism. But just two people sitting at a coffee shop talking about it themselves. Is it discriminating? Is it if you are looking for someone to date, if you only date people that are 6 foot or taller, because a lot of people openly talk about how they like tall people, are you discriminating against short people in your dating world?
I think probably yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the things that makes discrimination not always bad. For example, a woman could do probably many jobs in the military, but when the ones that are specifically involving throwing an adult male over your shoulder and getting out of the line of fire, maybe it would be good to discriminate against, well, men and women, but likely more so women in that department. That would make it not discrimination. That would mean that the job's calling for somebody that can lift that much weight, and therefore it unintentionally discriminates against women. I just think there's areas where discrimination isn't bad, but I feel like with this one with race, it's kind of discriminating to say while I'm dating I won't date this race, but I don't think that's wrong. Where I think the word racism should always mean wrong, right?
Would always mean wrong.
Like should in the sense that like you can say, oh, this discrimination is okay. Would you say, oh, this racism is okay?
Um,
Or would it just not be
well,
racism if it's okay?
it would just. I think so. I mean, you take really any scary word, and there's context in which that scary word is actually a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right? It's like um, ta taxation is theft, but not all theft is wrong, or like yeah, affirmative action is racist, but maybe not all racism is wrong. Um, or like
Hmm.
um, or maybe like Martin Luther King was a criminal, but not maybe not all crime is wrong. Stuff like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well,
but
here,
in but
I'm just going to read this definition real quick for discrimination, and this is Oxford again. The unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people, especially on the grounds of ethnicity, age, sex, and disability. It says the unjust. So maybe that's where it's not discrimination if it's just.
oh, the unjust. Okay, so if there's like some justification for the discrimination, or like the just some justification for the what would typically be a racist action, it's no longer racist.
Yeah, racist or not, just discrimination itself. If it's justified, then it's not discrimination. It must be another word. Um,
I don't know about like I'm sure a racist feels like it's justified,
yeah, let's
you know.
see. Bias. I'm trying to look at the synonyms, but they all look bad. Uh, sexism, racism, or similar. It's not synonyms. It's just similar. Discrimination. Synonym. Prejudice, bias, bigotry, intolerance, unfairness, favoritism. Yeah, none of these are good. These are bad. Well, anyways, there we need to create a word for good discrimination. um, Yeah. Okay, so you were saying the thing about I don't like black people because they're black. And then I adjusted it to be talking about liking the look of. But so I think we both agree that it's fine to not like the look of a race of people, whether it's for dating or just for looking at, just for the pleasure of our eyes being open. You could say, I'd rather have my eyes closed than to look at this race. It would sound offensive, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything wrong. You're just, it's no different than saying I'd rather watch a Marvel movie than a DC movie. You're just announcing what you prefer your eyes to take in. Now, what if we switch it back to what you initially said, except the black version of the green thing, because I don't mind coming across awkward on here. I don't like black people. Oh, I'm quoting here in case anybody clips this. Okay. I don't like black people because they are black. That seems like something worth calling racism. But then that gets me to the point of something being that extreme is just such nonsense that I wonder if it matters. So let's say my neighbor says this and I hear it and he means it and I know he means it. He doesn't like black people because they're black. How should that affect the world? I'll just leave it there. Yeah. Well, how should that affect anything that he says this?
I mean, you take care of it in the same way that you take care of um, anything else. You look at the foreseeable consequences. So it's like if he just says that in his backyard, if he just, and like nothing really comes about it, like sure. But if he's like, going out and like now he's like going on this like rampage, like killing black people or something, like then okay, then yeah, we need to like step in and like yeah, but yeah, he can like sort of just like have his opinions and views as long as he's not like acting on them, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I feel. I used to want to try to change all the hearts and minds of everybody, and then I got to the point where what I view mattering is would be the laws. So he can have those feelings and just feel them, but as long as we make it illegal to kill somebody because they're black or to kill somebody because they're, to have all the things in place. It's not just that you have protection for heterosexual white people. It's you have the protection from this action, protection from murder. So if a racist person's going to murder somebody of a different race because they're black, it's no different than killing somebody for non-racist reasons. The protections are in there. So that I kind of have adjusted my caring to come down to legal actions. So yeah, I guess that's why most of the isms and the phobias I don't care about, because I can't think of the last time I felt any need to call somebody racist or talk about somebody's racism. It doesn't mean the word shouldn't exist anymore. I just I'm so irritated that it's all thrown out like candy that I like to look back and see, like, why do I not use these words, and should other people use them less?
So okay, so you don't think racism is a useless word. You just think it's used too much.
I can't really imagine where I would use the word other than to for one, discuss the topic like we're discussing now, and for two, maybe to discuss it with people that are talking about racism. Like, so I guess it's just that same first one, but like, as you probably know, a lot of more like left-leaning people, which I think of myself as left-leaning, but there's like an extreme group of people, the loudest on the internet. There's been many years of like shit talking on white people and a lot of stuff about like unrest of race stuff in the U.S. And so when people talk about that, I see some use to kind of counter it with itself, to talk about racism as people are talking about racism. But no, outside of that, if my neighbor said something like, I don't like black people because they're black, I guess I could think of that as racist because I know the word racist. But if I were to tell my wife, like, hey, let's not have the kids go to that house, I'd be like, this guy said this thing. It's kind of sketchy. Maybe we should keep our kids away from this neighbor. Um, I wouldn't need to say, let's keep them away because he's racist. It would be, because if I just said, let's keep them away because he's racist, whoever I'm talking to would think, well, I wonder what he means. Like, what's the racist thing? Now, if I say, let's keep them away because he said, I don't like black people because they're black, then that would be enough. You wouldn't need the word racist. So I'm sure it's necessary, maybe in some like writing a book or writing some essays, to get something, to get an idea across in a short form. But yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine ever needing to use the word.
Do you hold the I don't know. I feel like people have this attitude where they don't want to be racist. So if you can like point out some action they're doing that is racist, they may be able to change and then have less racist consequences.
That might be fair, but I also, it seems like whenever, not only especially like online, so the internet has changed a lot of things, but online, I feel like if I ever see somebody call somebody racist, they're just going to feel offended that they're called racist, and they're not going to like change from anything. But if you explain to them why what they said is wrong, I think that might get somebody a lot further. But I agree with your general idea.
You hold the same is it so is this why you said you're not convinced speciesism is a useful word? Is it the
Yeah,
same idea?
yeah, and almost more so with speciesism. So yeah. Yeah, so we can hop over to that. Vabehav in the comments wants us to hop over to phobias, but I think they're basically synonymous. Having like racism or sexism, which is discrimination of race or sex. If you have like homophobia, that's discrimination of sexual orientation. So they're about the same. But yeah, let's go to speciesism, and then we can hop over to a phobia or two after that. Do you prefer speciesism to racism, as far as if you think it's more useful of a word, or that you would use it more?
Maybe. I mean, I don't think I have strong opinions on whether or not I use it more or not, but I do think speciesism is a useful word. Yeah.
Okay.
I also think racism is a useful word as well. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, so I guess it's probably the same. Anything you can explain, I would probably say, instead of telling somebody they're speciesist, I would just describe what the speciesist thing is. And I'm a type of person personally that likes to have conversations like this and not just type up quick things online. So maybe it's a more useful thing in a quick, like, not having a long form conversation. But yeah, go ahead and give me an example of where you think speciesism, it would be better to say than to just explain the problem with what the person's saying or acting.
Um. Well, so I think so. People don't like racism. People have very strong views about racism, and so I think if you like give examples or show people that oh, this, discriminating, petting dogs but killing pigs is like some is very there's a lot of overlap between um racism and speciesism kind of start to overlap there. um I think it's people start to realize like, oh, like it gets them thinking like, oh, maybe I should think about this more, because it's like it's coming from a
Mm.
place of like a place they already dislike, and they can like sort of relate that to the species rather than like the race.
Okay. No, I think I figured out what it is. I think I figured out the difference. So don't get me wrong. I'm not thinking that it's bad to provoke. Provoking could be good. But I think my personality doesn't like to provoke. I like to have as middle ground of conversations as possible, because in my opinion, the best way to have change is conversation, and the best way to have conversations is to make the other person not feel pushed out. And so in the same sense that I don't mind thinking of what currently is happening with animals as a holocaust. I can know from witnessing how people react to stuff that if you say the animal holocaust, people say, oh, you're comparing it to Jews. And then I have to try to think of how to explain to them that they don't know what the word compare means, let alone the word holocaust. But I would rather them have interest in listening to me. And so I'm not going to lie or not say how I feel to get them to listen to me. But I'll try to not provoke when unneeded. So I wouldn't call somebody racist. I would point out a racist action they're doing and see how they feel about it, and see if they can explain to me why they can justify it. And same thing with speciesism. I wouldn't say you're a speciesist or like you're a carnist. I would say, like, how if you're against torturing an animal for fun, then why are you okay with torturing an animal to eat unhealthy ice cream or hot dogs or something? And then they can tell me. But if I can get them to tell me a response without the less irritated they can feel while telling me a response, I feel the better. And so maybe that's the thing, is some people will say animal holocaust, or some people will say you're a speciesist or a carnist to provoke, because they are aware that that can also be beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, I am guilty of it, especially on Twitter, of like like calling people out and stuff, like, like you're a speciesist or whatever. But I think there's a lot of utility in like you not saying that they are a speciesist, but saying like, oh well, this um separating it. So you're looking at a separate situation, and maybe they are doing that situation, but you're not saying you are this, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can be like, um,
Yeah, you can be
yeah,
describing a speciesist act. You can say, why are you petting this dog and killing this pig? But you don't need to say, why are you petting this dog and killing this pig? That is speciesist. Because that extra word, like, is it useful? Did it add to the conversation? Now, potentially it added to the conversation because if somebody's called out for doing something bad, if they can compare the ist to another ist, then that can be beneficial. It could lead to a good outcome. But is there anything beneficial word-wise that's happening here? And I would say not. I would say that it's not describing anything better. It's not. If the actions of petting a dog and killing a pig is speciesist, then that description itself without the word speciesist is already sufficient, I would say.
I think it like kind of sort of like lights up something in people's brains, um, simply because they don't like racism. So they're hearing like a similar word with a similar like context. I think it helps them understand it better. I think even if you just described the situation, and didn't say speciesism, yeah, that would probably work. But if you said speciesism, it would add to it. I think it would just like it would help them better understand it by like having something to relate it to. And I think, I mean, like, animal liberation, like that was a big part of the book, right? Speciesism.
I haven't read the book, but I think I heard that that was maybe one of the first places speciesism was talked about.
Yeah, he kind of he didn't coin the term, but he pioneered it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, like he's one of the biggest uh animal rights people out there. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can imagine and that's why I said earlier, like in a book or an essay or something, I could imagine it being written to have the comparison to show people like if being this race and treating this race a certain way is racism, then treating this species this way and this one this different way is speciesism. If you write that down in a way where somebody can like pick up this book and read it and go, oh, I've never thought about that before. And they're reading an idea and contemplating it. I feel like that's a big difference from having a one-on-one conversation. And again, this is just me. Everybody has their personal things. And I don't want the words to be removed from the dictionary or anything. It's more so just an interest in discussing it the way we are. I just see more likelihood for pushing people away from a conversation if you use it in voice-to-voice conversation.
Hmm. So wait, you I may have missed something there. So what so voice to so
So like if
okay,
you're
so just
talking with a person that you want to take in what they're saying and think about it, and you want them to take in what you're saying and think about it. You don't want them to go, "Oh, stupid vegan, I'm pushing you away" or whatever. And
okay.
so if you're talking, you want there to be levels of respect. So if you're like wondering like why would you do this to a dog and not a pig or whatever, if you say you're a speciesist, why would you do this? Then it's provoking. Where in a book, if you're writing down ideas that somebody can read, I don't think they would feel like it's targeting them. It's targeting an idea.
Oh, well yeah, you can target idea in like face-to-face conversation as well.
Hmm.
I think the critique, yeah, the critique isn't like the word speciesism, it's calling somebody a speciesist and then them getting defensive and then not being open to change. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's just yeah. It's complicated and stuff. Um, but yeah, let's hop over. I probably got another 10, 20 minutes. I don't if you do. That'd be good. But I kind of I want the last thing we talk about to be the Islamophobia because I kind of know where you stand on that. But do you have any thoughts that you want to go over that you feel are at all different from what we're currently talking about? Different thoughts on like maybe homophobia or anything with the phobias versus the isms?
Um, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, let me check on this then, because I used to. I mean, I'm very like pro accepting of everybody being whoever they are. I'm all about like I could not care less about when an adult human sees another adult human if they're attracted to them. I like the idea of anybody thinking that that should matter to them in any way is the silliest thing in the world. That being said, personal opinions I also don't care about. I'm perfectly fine with anybody having a personal opinion. So I have a handful of friends that are religious, and their religion happens to say being gay is wrong. So I have like a close friend that will say, "Oh, I think it's a sin to be gay." Now they'll say this out loud, so they would say this in a conversation with me that might be recorded, knowing that somebody can hear it and their feelings might be hurt or whatever. But outside of that, outside of being willing to admit their opinion on it, they would never want there to be a law against being gay or gay marriage. They would never want to go say mean things to a gay person. I used to have a strong negative stance towards the idea of somebody just having that opinion that it's a sin to be gay. I kind of lean away from that now, and I'm curious to see what your thoughts are. But if somebody says that they think it's a sin to be gay, I don't think of that friend or person any less. I just look at that person as a person that holds an opinion that boggles my mind because I'm not religious.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have similar views. Like when it comes to like a lot of religion, like if if that religion was shown to be true, I think a lot of us would change our opinions about whether or not it's okay to be gay.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like if right, like if they don't want people to like suffer in like eternal hellfire, then it's like yeah, they may like have a yeah, they're coming from a different perspective, right? We're sort of like judging them based on our perspectives, and they so like the issue is just like I don't think they have good evidence for their claim of like their like belief system. That's the issue. The issue isn't that
Mhm.
they're saying, "Oh, you know, it's wrong to be gay." That's a symptom of the real issue, which is like that faith is not a good and like it's not a reliable way to come to know things. Yeah.
Now, would you treat that person? Would you not be friends with somebody because of an opinion they hold like that, or would it have to be that if they acted upon it, you would not be friends with them?
I will be friends with really anybody for any opinion. Like I'll be friends with a Christian or Muslim or a Nazi or what changes is the actions.
Okay.
And then even if they're making bad actions, if I think by being friends with them, that I can like reduce their actions, I'll still be friends with them. So it's like if my being friends with them does not like reduce any of their like bad actions, or like if by not being friends with them or it just comes down to consequences. Yeah.
Gotcha. Um, would it be the same with supporting somebody, maybe financially? So it's complicated when it comes to companies that do bad actions. But let's just say holding an opinion. Let's say you knew of an owner of a company that owner's personal opinion, they've made it public, just the way that any of us can make things public, that they think it's a sin to be gay. But they're not funneling money, like they're not openly funneling money to gay conversion therapy or anything like that. They're just the owner of a company. Would you boycott a company because the opinions of the owner?
Huzzah.
Okay. Question answered. Do you own that shirt only because you worked there, or do you wear it out of your house?
Yeah, I would. I do. I mean, um, yeah, I don't really have an issue with. I mean, uh, the issue with Chick-fil-A is all the chickens that they torture and murder. It's not the opinions of like the owners.
So, what are your thoughts on? Is there any shirt of something that you wouldn't wear? Like, if you view, let's say, over the history of Chick-fil-A, do you think it's likely that that rivals something really bad, like the Jewish Holocaust? The animals, the chickens killed for Chick-fil-A? And then my follow-up question would be like, would you wear a shirt like that with a swastika on it?
Oh well, okay. So that there's a couple questions there. I mean, like I would say that the amount of chickens that Chick-fil-A has tortured and slaughtered is pretty like on par with like the Holocaust. But um I think the issue with wearing like I wouldn't have any issues with like wearing a swastika for like sort of like I like as a joke or like just to be kind of edgy or whatever. Like if you don't like if you does like you don't actually believe it or anything like that.
Is
I
that
think
kind of what's happening with the Chick-fil-A thing? It's almost like a joke, and then your friends that are vegan or know you're vegan will say like, "What are you doing?"
kind of. I mean, a little bit. I mean, I also just like I like pink and the sweater's comfortable and you know. But when it comes to like wearing a swastika, like so if I walk around with like a Chick-fil-A logo, there's gonna be like a couple of like SJWs who are gonna be like, but for the most part, like people aren't really gonna care about it, right? But if I walk around with a swastika, people are gonna feel really upset and really freaked out, and it's gonna it's gonna cause like quite a bit of suffering there. Yeah.
Do you think there's any chance that you know how there's kind of like a science to marketing. I don't know all the details, but you see a name over and over, and then it like gets in your head. Like if you're feeling hungry later, you think of a thing. Do you think there's any chance that you have subconsciously, wearing that shirt, led people to go to Chick-fil-A that wouldn't have gone there? Not that it matters, because if they went to McDonald's instead of Chick-fil-A, it's not like they're going to be vegan for a day if they don't go to Chick-fil-A. But it's kind of interesting that maybe people saw your shirt and went, "Oh yeah, I'm actually kind of feeling some Chick-fil-A right now."
Yeah, I mean that would be good. I think it's like It's one of those things where it's like the potential consequences are small enough, but also unknown enough where like um I don't want to like be in like this like utilitarian like slavery where I'm like, oh like do I pick this wooden chair, or do I pick this wooden chair for my dining table? um
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I just ideas pop into my head, so I say them
Yeah,
out
yeah.
loud. But yeah, okay. Well, let's for this tail end of this, let's hop over to the Islamophobia. What are your thoughts on Islamophobia?
Well, I think it's like potentially actually a good thing to be Islamophobic. um
Hmm.
which, yeah, I mean, kind of controversial, but I think I basically hold the Sam Harris position, um where like the religion itself, um and like the doctrine is far, like there's issues with Christianity and stuff, but there's like um um yeah, it seems like being Islamophobic maybe actually be a good thing. Yeah, I don't
Gotcha.
know.
Okay, so it's interesting. We got the isms and we got the phobia. Now, I think when it comes to any, let's see, Islamophobia. Okay. Um, they're essentially the same thing. Um, it's just maybe homoism. No, anti-homoism would sound dumb, and anti-Islamism would sound dumb. Um, but obviously, when it comes to these maybe human issues, maybe that's the right term for it. The phobia is not referring of being scared of anything, so that makes the phobia part kind of silly. But when I look it up on the Oxford Dictionary, homophobia is dislike or prejudice against gay people. So that's very similar to racism, which would be prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism towards a race. And then Islamophobia is dislike or prejudice against Islam or Muslims, especially as a political force. A political force. Interesting that says political force. Now, I guess that makes it even more of a good thing to be Islamophobic. Is it's one thing to judge the race, or not the race, the religion's ideas, the ideas within the religion, but if those religious ideas become part of politics that directly affect humans legally, that's a thing to hate even more. So dislike or prejudice against Islam or Muslims, especially as okay. So I think it's probably fair to say that we shouldn't dislike Muslims, maybe, but we should dislike Islam. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah. You should love people and be hard on um I guess like, what would the word be? Um yeah, love people, but then be hard on like systems and institutions and
Mm-hmm.
consequences. Yeah.
Now, is this going to only have to do with what's current? For example, if the Christian Bible's ideas are not any better or worse than than the Quran, is it good to be Islamophobic because of the current actions versus the potential? Because Contrarian 420 says, by the same logic, would Jarom say it is good to be anti-Semitic if it's good to be Islamophobic?
You know, yeah, that's a good question. Again, be really loving of people, but then be really hard on their beliefs.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess that's kind of like what we were talking about with the issue with Islam, but not the issue with Muslims, and also the issue with the actions of Muslims. If one Muslim is just petting a dog and has a big smile on their face, there's nothing to judge in that moment. They're just petting a dog. If another Muslim is doing an act that comes out of being a Muslim, which I don't know, stoning somebody or something, then you would have something against that Muslim action. Now, somebody could just be a regular person that's not even religious at all. You could have an atheist stoning somebody just because, let's say, they enjoy stoning people. And so the bad act would be the stoning, whether you're Muslim or atheist. But so with Islamophobia, it would be a dislike for the book itself. Let's see, dislike or prejudice against Islam. So that would be the religion itself, the Quran, or Muslim. So it says or. It's not both, and it doesn't need to include Muslims. It's or. So having a dislike for Islam, not only do I find that to be a good action, and you find that to be a good action, it's at very least a neutral action. To me and you, I would say, because we're accepting of somebody thinking it's a sin to be gay, because that's just their opinion. They're not hurting anybody. And so us not liking a religion is not hurting anybody. So I feel like having a dislike for a religion, or even having a dislike for atheists, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah. Um. Well, I mean, I don't. Okay, so I don't know if I see it as wrong just because it aligns with. I mean, it just aligns with my preferences, right? So if someone that is really hard on my views of veganism, like if they love me but they don't like veganism, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, screw you, you know, like,
Mm-hmm.
like I don't like that, like But then again, it just goes. It's the whole thing of like we all have our preferences, and it's just like a battle of preferences, and that's kind of what morality is. Um,
Yeah.
you just made the best preference win, kind of thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, so I just found something that can kind of be a good way to explain the difference to Contrarian 420. He's the one that asked about the good to be anti-Semitic thing. And after I say that, I'm going to read Phil's comment. But the reason it's different, going by the definition, is so Islamophobia, dislike or prejudice against Islam, blah, 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 blah. Anti-Semitic, the definition according to Oxford is hostile to or prejudiced against Jewish people. So if there's a version of anti-Semitic, that would be a dislike of the Torah, or just a dislike of the Jewish religion, then whatever that is should be thought of as perfectly fine, because the Torah, holy shit. There's some cool story in there, but it's not good. Now, it doesn't mean that you could take every single Jewish person that is religion, let's ignore race, but every religiously Jewish person, and at some point in time, just we can hypothetically, magically make every single one of them great and would never follow a bad thing in the religion, and then there would be nobody saying there's anything, or at least, sorry, a good person probably wouldn't be saying there's anything wrong with the religion, or that the people, or the people of the religion, because they're not acting upon it. Where somebody that might have a stronger dislike for Islam than Christianity, they might be referring to the actions that are happening from people that are Islamic. Let's see. Okay, let's read Phil's comment here. Honest comment. I think phobia implies irrational. Okay, interesting. So I think it's Islamophobic to dislike someone because they identify as Muslim. Disliking, oh, it went away. Specific ideas within Islam is not a problem. Interesting. What are your thoughts on that?
repeat that one more time. I was reading comments,
Oh, you're
but
fine.
yeah.
So Phil just is pointing out that his thoughts on the phobias are that it implies it's irrational. So he says, I think it's Islamophobic to dislike someone because they identify as Muslim, but disliking somebody specific ideas within Islam is not a problem. So I think that's what it should be. I think I would view Islamophobia as a good thing to exist if it's referring to an irrational fear of somebody that identifies as Muslim. Because I could have a neighbor that says they're Muslim, and then if I don't even know if it would be bad to have the fear that what if they're a bad Muslim or whatever. But I think that might be worth having the definition. But at least according to Oxford, the irrational part's not in there.
Yeah, I don't. That's a interesting comment. I don't know if there needs to be some irrationality. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what Phil's saying, but
Well, he's just pointing out that what he views, if he was going to define Islamophobia or how he views the definition, is that it's referring to a rational fear. So if somebody says, I'm a Muslim, and then somebody else says like decides, oh, I don't like this person because they're a Muslim, that would be Islamophobia. But if somebody else said, I don't like these horrible teachings in Islam, or I don't like the stoning of women because of Islam, that would just be, that's not Islamophobia. That's just a take on religion, because that part's not irrational. So yeah.
gotcha. Okay. Are you crop dust phobic person?
I saw that. Well, I wish we could all eat food that doesn't have pesticides on it, assuming that my assumption that pesticides are bad to consume. Yeah, so I wish that were the case, which would lead to at least not the insect deaths and the deaths that follow from that. Yeah. Sorry, I was just Googling something. I want to see if. Oh, interesting. Okay, wild. I just looked up the Merriam-Webster definition of Islamophobia, and it says Islamophobia is the irrational fear of, or aversion to, or discrimination against Islam or people who practice Islam. So it has the irrational part. And yeah, that's interesting. So that would mean that according to Merriam-Webster's definition, that me and you are not Islamophobic. And then according to the Oxford Dictionary, we are both proudly Islamophobic, as everyone should be. So,
Nice.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, definitions are very interesting. How do you view definitions and them changing over time and stuff like that? Like, is there something to be done about it? Do you think that there should be like one? Yeah. What are your thoughts at the fact that Oxford just says dislike of Islam, and then Merriam-Webster says irrational dislike of Islam?
Well, okay, so yeah, definitions are made up. It's just people come together and they're like, wait, this means this, right? But then you can come in and say, actually, I don't like that this means that. I think it should mean this. Like, I want to make a correction. So then you kind of just go out and you, with your little megaphone, say, no, it should mean this. And that's kind of what's happening here. It's like you have the two different definitions. Um, it should mean this and it should mean this. And then it's just kind of up to us to like kind of just decide what definition we want to use. And then in conversation, we just have to make sure, like when I say this word, I'm using this definition. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because the whole point is just to understand each other, to know where we're coming from. if somebody makes a claim and then somebody is bothered by it for some reason or another, but it's only because they thought the person meant something different, as soon as the person clarifies what they meant by that word, the person listening should automatically adjust to that and not be countering the previous misunderstanding. Yeah, something about like my brain just wants everything to be perfect, and I'm like, I don't care if the definition is one I like or don't like. It's like if it's of the language I speak, I just want there to be one dictionary, and obviously that's not happening. But yeah, okay. So, okay, last question then. Would you rather the definition be like if there was only one, or what you were going to call the definition be the one that says the irrational fear, and then to use it in that way and to call it maybe a somewhat all right word? Or would you rather the definition be the dislike of Islam and then view that as a good action?
Uh, I don't have a strong view on that. The definition could be whatever the people want it to be. Like I don't, I can change, I can adapt. I don't really mind.
Yeah. Well, so for example, going into this conversation, we both declared that we are both Islamophobic and we think that's a good thing. Do you have any interest in, from this point on, viewing Islamophobic as referring to the irrational fear and therefore not calling yourself Islamophobic?
It would just depend on who I'm talking to, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, it would just depend on that. Like I have no issues with like even with veganism. Like I might not call myself a vegan depending on who I'm talking to, right?
Mm,
Um, like I'm fine with changing definitions just to adapt to the conversation.
gotcha. Gotcha. And that reminds me that, completely off topic, no connection to any of this, a question I need to ask you specifically. Um, but a couple lead up questions. Are you currently in favor of the idea of as humanely as possible euthanizing all deer?
Euthanizing all deer? Yeah, probably.
If you could just snap your fingers, they're gone. Okay. And so therefore, if let's say a hunter is a good shot, you're not really against the idea of hunting.
Yeah, I'm not hugely against hunting. I think it ends up becoming like a wash because of sounds weird, but like because hunting is good for the environment. Um,
Well, let's ignore
I
that
see
part.
that.
Let's imagine it wasn't good or bad. It just is a deer that existed and then it's magically gone. But you can have your knowledge of that deer have shitty lives or whatever.
Yeah. You know that. Yeah, then that'd be good. Yeah, I don't want to force deers to continue existing. In a life of suffering and pain.
Okay. So then my next question is, if you were at a store and you saw there was deer jerky and it was being sold at a good price, would you consume it because um, any actions that happened? Imagining the deer. I just found out recently there are deer farms. I didn't know this was a thing, but especially I looked it up because I saw this jerky at a store and it made me think of you. I like instantly thought, Jarom, deer jerky. Um, but imagining that, well, I don't know. Let's just imagine it's not horrible for your health or anything, and there's no environmental issues with the packaging it or whatever. Um, it's taking away from crop death, so that's cool. But
Maybe
if you
not
could
cool.
if you could know that it was all hunted deers and it was all taken out with good shots, would you consume that deer jerky?
Yeah. I mean, so assuming that it's not increasing demand for bringing more or breeding more deers into existence and stuff.
Yeah, let's
And
just say it was a company. They could get deer tags just like anybody else. They go out and they shoot deer in the wild, and then instead of taking it home and eating it with their family, they take it back to their factory and they turn it into jerky, and then they package it up and sell it to the public as long as they have supply.
Yeah. No, I think that'd be
Okay.
yeah.
I don't know if this exists, but I was just thinking about it. I definitely think it's just in the same sense that I think hunting is better than buying products that are factory farmed. I would say that this is just a store bought version of that. I don't know if anybody needs it. We don't need to do it. But if somebody was convinced that they needed animal products, they thought it would be healthy. I would much rather this type of thing exist. Wild boar, wild turkeys. You go out in, whatever is not harming the environment and is legally acceptable. You just something that's lived out in the wild and has had its life be whatever it is. You take it out as quick as possible. You make a jerky or whatever. I don't know why jerky is the go-to for this conversation, but yeah. Okay, interesting. I thought your answer would be something like that, and I was curious, and so I'm glad to hear it. But yeah, yeah. Any final thoughts before we hop off of this?
Um, I mean, so I guess the side comment is like you made a comment about crop deaths.
Mm.
Oh, actually, it was either you or Garland, but like, or maybe both of you, but like how like
I said
less
there would be
crop
less
deaths,
crop deaths if you eat deer that's hunted. Yeah.
and like that's a good thing.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's the case. I think like I'm actually maybe like pro crop deaths. Like I think we might want to maximize like um yeah like the amount of deaths that happen on crop fields, you know, compared to like the wild land it's on versus like um the amount of suffering in like a factory farm, like um it just seems like we want to like have as many crops as possible. That's actually one of the
Um,
good. That's what like that's actually one of the good things about animal farming is that it has so much more crops.
yeah, I disagree with you on a lot of levels, but I'm trying to think of the best way to disagree with you on a level that we can see eye to eye on. Um, um, I think it's important to look at which animals are affected. So, like, I'm guessing similar to me, you don't really care much about insects, at least without further information from scientific studies. So, the insects being wiped out with pesticides without knowing more about environment or level of sentience, it's kind of worth ignoring. But the like birds and other animals that eat those insects and then the pesticides make them like bleed internally and die suffering painful deaths. I think it would come down to how much disdain you have for the birds. So I think the crop deaths aren't good if we're referring to something like millions of birds dying horrible deaths because of the pesticides, where other crops might be. Yeah, I don't know.
So I value reducing the suffering of like the animals that die within the crops and stuff like that. But if I don't value reducing crop deaths, if that means increasing more wild land.
Well, which is yeah, and so it's complicated, but I would say that if if you took a piece of wild land, like 1 acre of wild land, and you turned it into an area that could be crops, and you would say the crop deaths here is better than the suffering on the wild land, then you could also say that that 1 acre should just be fenced off, no animals come in it at all. You're preventing any wild suffering in that area, but you're also not even growing crops. So you're not having the crop deaths in that area. And then that must be better than both. This is assuming that we wouldn't need that land for making food for us to consume. But at best, the only thing that the crop deaths is better than is what naturally would have happened. But it doesn't mean that something else isn't even better than that.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, like the whole thing with crops is like it's sort of like necessary for um like maximizing utility as far as um like we need to be like survive to like actually like be happy and you know, so we need some sort of food source. But assuming we could like take some sort of pill or something and then just like have no crop deaths. You know, we could pave over nature or something. Just
Hmm.
one giant parking lot. Um, that'd probably be best. Or like a giant parking lot and then like a bunch of animals that are actually have net positive lives. Um,
Gotcha. Interesting. Well, I don't know enough to comment on that too much, but I do want to read this real quick. I guess Eric is unable to comment in here, but Phil has been copying and pasting Eric's questions, and it says, "Why would you be for euthanizing all deer? It would decimate the ecosystem."
well, I mean, so in the sort of the conversation that me and Carson were having, we sort of said that it wouldn't. It's just like in a vacuum. But
Yeah.
uh, even if it would, I might be in favor of it still. Like it's just, but I don't know. It's just not clear whether or not the harms of like the ecosystem versus like reducing wild animal suffering versus,
Mhm.
yeah, I actually don't know what
Yeah, I think the easiest way to look at it would be if you could press a button and magically, for the rest of existence of sentient life, this button you're pressing would do the action that would cause the least amount of suffering for all of the future. No matter how many animals or humans that killed, that's what you would do.
well, no, no, because I mean, I would rephrase it a little bit. I would just do whatever would um maximize utility. So like I can increase suffering. I'm fine with that as long as like utilities. So like if suffering increases but pleasure increases like 10
Oh,
times that,
for some reason I was
right?
thinking you were on the right side, which would be, um, which would be caring about the suffering but not caring about the pleasure.
Oh
But for
no,
you, it's the mathematical equation. Okay, that's the
yeah.
wrong side, and we'll figure that out later. But um, yeah, interesting. Okay. So you'd press the button that it wouldn't matter how many animals, whether it was an entire species or not, or how many humans or whatever, as long as we could magically know that it would lead to the best outcome of the mathematical equation of suffering versus pleasure. Um,
Yeah.
and it would be an evened out, somewhat evened out suffering versus pleasure per individual that can suffer and feel pleasure. Like in this equation, you would much rather have pleasure and suffering be divided amongst all. Like you wouldn't want 10% of the individuals in this situation to have pure suffering as long as a different 10% had pure pleasure. Like you'd want it as evened out as possible, if possible, and magically.
Maybe. I mean, I do. I mean, this would be a whole like other conversation, but I do bite like. Are you familiar with like the utility monster?
Vaguely, fill me in.
So like imagine you have one person, like one monster, just like going around and like killing everybody, or like
Mhm.
eating everybody or something. But their pleasure is just so high, like the total amount of utility, like is just like they have trillions and trillions of utility that it just outweighs the suffering of everybody else. Um, like everybody else combined. So they're just like running around. Like I bite that bullet. I think the utility monster is like moral.
Hmm.
So
It
I
would
what I
depend.
care. Yeah. So it's like
I Yeah.
the whole
I'll go for it.
spreading out thing. The whole like spreading out thing. It's like sure. Like I think that like more happy people is good because like they can come together and create more happiness and like you know but like in like a vacuum what I ultimately value is just like the um the pleasure itself, like the utility itself. So if you just had one utility monster,
Hmm.
I'd value that kind of the same as like if that was spread out amongst everybody. Yeah.
Gotcha. And I guess part of it for me would depend on if the person wants that. So if and I'm imagining this utility monster. is kill, like let's say the monster's going around killing off people, and it's constantly killing off about 10% of people. So 90% of people are just living lives normally, and then they're killing off like 10% of people, but then those people are feeling this amazing pleasure before the during the process of their death. Is that correct?
Wait, the people. So the person experiencing pleasure is the utility monster.
Oh, the
So the
monster's feeling the
the
pleasure. Oh, I thought you were
yeah.
saying the people they were killing, they're feeling pleasure up until their death. So much pleasure that maybe it outweighs the suffering they're going through.
No, the pleasure of the utility monster outweighs the suffering of everybody that the utility monster is.
Oh, okay. So if I magically create this monster, I press a button, this monster starts existing now, and the monster can feel pleasure or pain, and it goes around making people suffer and die, and it gives that utility monster so much pleasure that no matter what, we have to view this as pleasure outweighing certain levels of suffering.
Yeah.
And you like this monster, is what you're saying?
Yeah, and then it's a whole like that's a whole conversation. But yeah, I bite that bullet. So when you say that like you'd prefer it to be spread out, it's like I mean I prefer only in that like it may like increase you like it may increase that number, right? Just because like people working together increases happiness and stuff. But if it were the case that the ultimate happiness was just like one person,
Yeah.
all the utility was from one person, then yeah.
That's interesting you bite that bullet because I feel like you didn't bite the bullet last time that we talked about the situation where you have 10 guys sexually assaulting one lady, and let's say that they just super enjoy the activity of doing it against somebody's will. They like it's the greatest pleasure ever for them. And then let's remove the fear of others. So let's make it so these 10 guys, when they do this afterwards, they execute her. And it's just like they do it in a way where they travel to such distances that there's no fear that women are having of being kidnapped and sexually assaulted. You would have to, I think you would have to bite that bullet if these 10 guys were all getting this extreme pleasure. Probably even if it was one guy, it would be the utility monster of sexual assault. That you would value that. Do you bite that bullet now with that?
um yeah, so we should make it we should make it clear that like uh this is not something we should like this is not a situation we should value in real life. It's going to have really bad consequences, but in a vacuum I do value that. I do value the like
Can we put
I
it in
would
a real
say
life vacuum?
a real life vacuum. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Like
So what I'm saying is so obviously it's hypothetical. So we're not going to make it happen. I'm not going to be one of the 10 guys and go demonstrate this for you and film it or anything. But just imagining if this really happened, you could magically know it, but you have like you I guess you could be fearful for other people, but you, Jarom, can be aware this is happening, but you know that nobody else is in fear. And you could magically look and see this amount of pleasure, and it would reach your satisfaction. Would you, if you could press a button that would prevent them from going and sexually assaulting this woman and then executing her and burying the body and then traveling a far distance to do it again without there being any fear of other people, would you press the button and make them not do it? Or would you not press the button and know that you're making the utility meter a little less of what you kind of think you want, that hopefully you'll realize you don't want?
yeah, I'll get canceled, but yeah, I wouldn't press the button. Yeah.
Well, I don't think you should get canceled, but I hope you change your mind in the near future.
It's so yeah.
Like, why do you value well-being, suffering, pleasure, like these details of being sentient I can't. I guess I just can't. I can't wrap my mind around. So like, I would agree with you on elements of like, so somebody that would commit this act, I don't blame them any more than I blame somebody for enjoying the Beatles. They can't control that. They hear the Beatles and their mind tells them if they like it. They can't control it. So somebody, I think people can control their actions, hopefully can stop themselves from doing a bad act. But the want to do it, we can view that want as bad. They want to go and overpower somebody and do this act that's going to make them feel uncomfortable. I agree with you, and I'm just assuming that you feel this way because we've talked before. I agree with you that they don't have pretty much any free will. They were born with the want to do this act that we would call bad. You would call their pleasure good, but aside from their pleasure they get, we'd call the act bad. I agree with that. They don't have this control. But I just don't get the idea of why you would want that person to gain pleasure if it means that it's going to cause the suffering of somebody that also was born without the free will to make their choices. You got just two different people. Wouldn't it just be better to have as much as possible of less suffering, so they wouldn't get this pleasure from doing this act they want, so they'd have this kind of mundane life of not fulfilling this need they want, while this other person also wouldn't feel the suffering from being sexually assaulted. And the pleasures might not go to as high of extremes, but the sufferings would be so minimized. I feel like that must be like, I feel like, anyway, sorry. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Sort of the way maybe this doesn't make sense, but sort of the way I look at it is like, in the context of like humans and insects, where it's like, increasing the suffering of insects, so we can like take our kids to school, like the pleasure of like living in a society and stuff like that. And then we just like, just keep pushing that into bigger and bigger extremes until you get to something like a utility monster. And then the
But
part
we
about
just shouldn't get to the utility monster. I agree with you. In some cases, we have to pick and choose. We have to, if we're on an island and we're starving and we want to feed our family, we might have to kill this innocent person to feed our family. We're going to make some bad calls, and we're definitely going to make insects suffer to take our kids to school or whatever. But why does it have to get to the utility monster?
well, so along the line, like I don't see any like part where it's like, oh well, now the increase of like utility is now bad. Like I just don't have the intuition. Like like it's like a yeah, it's like you have one scenario. It's like, okay, yeah, we cause some suffering to insects to do this, um, which brings us a little bit of happiness. And then the next scenario is like, well, okay, we can cause a little bit more suffering to insects, but like increase our happiness even more, where like the math checks out, right? So the pleasure is higher than the suffering. Like that seems to be better than the last one. And then you go up to the next thing. You just it just keeps scaling up, and it's like there's no point where um
Well, I think it
what
depends
so
on
it's
the
like
amount
if
of suffering and pleasure too, right? Like with insects, the reason it's hard for me to care is because I don't really know how much they suffer, and I can assume they don't suffer much. But like if I knew that there was some like factory where dogs were just being tortured and suffering, so cars could run or whatever, I might start being against that. I might start going, okay, let's I know dogs can suffer. I'm being shown here they are suffering. I care more about people than I care about dogs, so they can suffer if it means we can get dying people to the hospital. But I don't care about people to the level of getting them to the park to play makes me want these dogs to suffer. So I can pick and choose little bits of things. But once I know that there's a level of suffering, I guess I just like I want to know what your intuitions look like when you're choosing pleasure in one case over suffering in another case. Like I view there being a direct line. It's not like pleasure and suffering are all part of the same spectrum. You have the ability to suffer. You can suffer the most possible or not at all. And then separately, a complete thing, not on the same line, a whole different area of space. You have the ability to have as much pleasure as possible or as little as possible. And I guess I just don't think of that pleasure as needing to ever cross over. But maybe I'm contradicting myself. I don't know.
Um, I mean, I kind of, I mean, I view them as separate as well. I mean, they interact with each other sometimes, but like, I do think that pleasure can offset suffering.
Hmm.
I'm trying. What would be like an example? Um, maybe it's not a good example, but I don't know, like alcohol and a chaser, two different things, but like the chaser can offset the taste of the alcohol.
I don't drink
Um,
alcohol, so I can't really comment on that one. But like, if I could like break somebody's toe to save my child's life or something, I would do it.
yeah.
But I wouldn't break their toe to bring my child pleasure. It would just be to save their life. So maybe, am I breaking their toe to give myself pleasure? No, I mean, I'm saving my child because it brings me pleasure. I'm doing it because of a desire. I think every action we do is based on pleasure. But I'm not breaking the toe because the pleasure outweighs it. I think. Am I?
Um, would you say you're breaking the toe to like? Would you say you're breaking the toe to reduce the suffering of your child?
No, if my child's gonna die and breaking somebody's toe makes my child stay alive, and I do math to decide I'm willing to do this, which obviously I would. No, it's not to reduce suffering. It's not to gain pleasure. Um, in fact, I'd sacrifice pleasure to bring the child back as well. Um, and I'm causing suffering to bring the child back, but I'm not causing suffering to. I think causing suffering to bring pleasure is wrong, and that's why I'm vegan. Um, it wouldn't matter how much pleasure it is if it took the tiniest amount of suffering to get this amazing tasting animal flesh. I'd just be like, yeah, the amount of pleasure I'm getting doesn't matter. It's that I don't want to cause suffering. I guess I just when I think of well-being, maybe not even when I think of well-being, but when I think of what I view as right or wrong, I don't view pleasure as right. I don't view that I owe anybody giving them pleasure, but I do view that it's wrong if I cause suffering. And so I wouldn't think of like, I can cause pleasure here, therefore, if I cause a little suffering here, it doesn't matter. I think some consequentialists view it as a mathematical equation, where the mathematical equation side of it to me would be, what is the number of suffering? If the number of suffering is 100, I want it to be 90 or 80 or 99. Not, well, how much pleasure do we got? That'll let us know how much suffering we can adjust. And, yeah.
So even in situations where, um, so we're not even just talking about like there's this suffering that has nothing to do with this pleasure, and then like this pleasure is offsetting this suffering, but they have nothing to do with each other. Um, like cases of like what if calling somebody a name or like pushing them a little bit like just gave billions of people like eternal bliss. Um, and it was like
Hmm.
consequentially like that would happen. Um, because
Yeah,
like they're
yeah.
connected.
Yeah, maybe if it's a small enough amount of suffering to cause a higher number of people something good, maybe, which is why I don't get the utility monster aspect. I'd just rather the utility monster not exist at all, because it's like creating something to feel pleasure while the other things that maybe already were created. Although I guess you could just say that they're all magically created at the same time. But yes, I would say that, well, and like somebody in the comments here said, would you give someone else a pinprick to get $5,000 for yourself? Which is, it was something like what you're saying, but with the one you're saying, it's even more like if you give 100 random people will get some amount of pleasure by giving somebody else the tiniest amount of suffering or whatever. I would say, yeah, like there's going to be some cases where if the suffering is so minimal and the pleasures are high, or there's just added pleasure, then sure. But I don't think it goes much past that. I don't think anybody deserves to suffer because I'm going to make them suffer to cause extra pleasure elsewhere.
Would you cause somebody to suffer if it meant reducing the suffering of others, though? So like going back to the whole insects thing, right? Like cause the suffering of insects to reduce the suffering of like humans.
Yeah, again, it would be a small amount. Like I think those of us that are here are here. If we're brought into this world, we're brought into this world, and I don't think anybody should be made to suffer for the most part, just to help the numbers add up. I think we should just do our best to not make people suffer. And if people are suffering, we could do our best to help them not be suffering. But it would be a very minimal amount. Like it's kind of like the toe thing. I would break somebody's toe if it meant saving the lives, or let's say a wild amount of suffering of 1,000 people or whatever. If it meant that suffering was going to stop, I might break a toe. Would I remove a toe? Would I remove a hand, a leg? Probably not. Because I think I think it's worse to cause suffering than to prevent suffering. But maybe I'm wrong.
To cause something than to prevent. Yeah, no.
Or sorry, is it worse to cause suffering than to not prevent suffering? I worded that funny. But yeah, so if somebody was going to get a toe, if I could break a toe, or if somebody was going to get a toe broken and I could stop them from getting their toe broken, I think it's worse of me to break the toe than to not stop the person. Yeah. I think. It's a lot to think over, but it is actually getting kind of late. Not late, but late as far as some things I got to get done. But I think this was a great talk, and I would like to delve further into the utilitarian side of things because I really think breaking these things down is very interesting. Yeah. But anyways, it's good talking, and I hope you have a good one.
Appreciate it.
All right, take care, my friend.
Yep.